Speaker, it is true that we are living in difficult times economically. That we must acknowledge, all of us. And that, Speaker, it is also true that our counties are seriously suffering. That there are services that are being rendered in counties and for which there is no money to pay. Business people, Mr. Speaker, in the counties are counting their losses. Employees, staff in the counties are also suffering. Some counties, Mr. Speaker, have actually almost ground to a halt. And so, Mr. Speaker, it is in the context of that background that we are debating this recommendation by the Mediation Committee to agree on a figure that, in the wisdom of the committee, because we gave the committee the mandate, then the figure in their own wisdom then is reasonable. Mr. Speaker, allow me to say a few things before I make a declaration on my position on whether I'll support or I don't support. One, Mr. Speaker, as we debate this report, it shall be remembered that our counties, most of them, have actually come under the capture of sitting governors. That governors have actually become the stumbling block for success and progress in their own devolved units. I say this, Mr. Speaker, because having listened carefully to what almost every senator said, there is a common denominator when it comes to the behavior and accountability of a majority of the governors in this country. So, Speaker, it should be remembered, and this is for members to take note, that in fact it is the business of Parliament to share revenue amongst the two levels of government, the national government and the county governments. And that, Mr. Speaker, that the decision of Parliament on how that money is shared must never be influenced by the plans of the national government, the aspirations of the national government. It must be a very objective decision made by Parliament, because both governments belong to this country. I want to say two things, Mr. Speaker, about the utilization of this money that we want to devolve to our counties, especially in the health sector. We agree that health is a devolved function. But, Mr. Speaker, I don't know of any county, and I stand to be corrected, Mr. Speaker, I don't know of any county that can stand here and say that their health sector is in good shape. I don't know of any county. At least I can speak for my county. I can speak for counties in my region. So, Speaker, health has become a major, major challenge to counties and county governments. From basic lack of infrastructure, even for health facilities, to drugs, to equipment, to personnel. Mr. Speaker, I will be recommending, as a senator of Kitui, that there will be need for a national conversation around the mess in the health sector. I say that, Mr. Speaker, because everybody aspires to achieve UHC, universal health coverage. And it's a beautiful thing. Everybody wants us to get there. But, Mr. Speaker, truth be told, if we don't fix the basics, then this talk about UHC is just empty talk. We must have the courage, Mr. Speaker, to ask ourselves, what exactly is the problem with our health sector in all counties in this country, and even at the national level? The Speaker, access to affordable health care, to me, where I sit, is actually a basic human right. A right that must be afforded every Kenyan in every corner of this country. And so, Mr. Speaker, even as we debate the money that we are going to be devolving to our counties, it will be important to also, as a Senate and as individual senators, to scrutinize the percentage of county budgets that goes into healthcare. And do this in liaison with our respective county assemblies. Mr. Speaker, this is important. And I was having a conversation with a neighboring county to Kitui, and the governor from that county said something that was very, very profound, Mr. Speaker. That if healthcare collapses in one county, then the ripple effect is felt in all the other frontline counties. Because, the Speaker, you and I share a border. If Meru health sector is dysfunctional, then the effects of that dysfunction will be felt in Tharaka Nithi, it will be felt in Kitui, it will be felt in Embu. The Speaker, concerted efforts must be made to ensure the success of the health sector in our counties. And there is no magic to it, Mr. Speaker. The only way of doing this is to make sure that governors and their governments allocate sufficient resources, and those resources are properly used to roll out programs in the health sector. The Speaker, the other matter that I want to talk about is just a general pilferage of resources, county resources. The outright disregard to accounting procedures in most of our counties. Mr. Speaker, I have had a senator here lamenting twice, but maybe 3 times, that their governor or their government caused to be voided if mistransactions 1,600 times. Mr. Speaker, some things the Speaker says, some things can only happen in Kenya. How can you void if mistransactions 1,600 times and pretend that you're doing a clean job? And then the matter is taken to EACC and other investigating agencies, and somehow a way out is found. Mr. Speaker, I come from a county in Kitui where an accountant would just sign off audit reports that they have not prepared and submit them to the Office of the Auditor General. And when mistakes and outright evidence of theft is detected, they simply say, we did not prepare those reports. Somebody else prepared, we were asked to sign, because the person who prepared is not authorized to sign. Mr. Speaker, you know, there is a casualness in handling of county resources that must be stopped. Mr. Speaker, our governors must know, if they don't know, they must know that they don't own the counties in which they serve. That they are actually just stewards of public resources. And that it is expected of them to be vigilant and act responsibly, Mr. Speaker, in the management of those resources. Mr. Speaker, I say this knowing pretty well that the framers of our Constitution and the concept of devolution, there was, Mr. Speaker, an intention on the part of the framers of the Constitution that, Mr. Speaker, the issue of resources is supposed to be organized in such a way that county governments must not perpetually just rely on disbursements from the National Exchequer. That they should look for revenue streams within their counties without necessarily, Mr. Speaker, overburdening the local communities, but to raise sufficient funds to be able to carry out basic functions. But, Mr. Speaker, the concern that I have, and I'm very sure it is the concern of a lot of other senators here, is that instead of using own source revenue streams, Mr. Speaker, to enrich county revenue, to carry out basic county functions, a lot of these governors, Mr. Speaker, are using own source revenue streams as avenues for self-enrichment. Mr. Speaker, I come from a rain deficit region, an arid and semi-arid area, Mr. Speaker. A region that we don't grow coffee or tea or any other non-cash crop. But, Mr. Speaker, I come from a region that is rich in other resources that bring revenue to a county. We have the best river sand from the region where I come from. So, Speaker, I would dare say, though I don't have the facts, but I would dare say that perhaps a big percentage of the construction that takes place in the Nairobi City County, the river sand used, comes from Ukambani. And, Mr. Speaker, it doesn't come cheap. It is expensive. But, Mr. Speaker, governors have used river sand harvesting as a way of enriching themselves and their cronies at the expense of the communities around which the sand is harvested, at the expense, Mr. Speaker, of the county revenues of Kitui and the region. Mr. Speaker, I want to say this, that as the Bible says, the time has come and now is, Mr. Speaker. I want to say, as the Senator of Kitui County, I think that time has come. That we will no longer sit back, Mr. Speaker, and watch our resources being plundered for self-enrichment. We will not sit back with the Speaker and watch as our riverbeds in the Speaker are being turned into barren bedrocks with the Speaker. We shall not watch the Speaker and see as people neighboring rivers where the sand is being harvested are impoverished day in, day out, and some people, a few people in the Speaker are just lining their pockets. The Speaker, this must stop. The other issue in the Speaker is the issue of charcoal burning. The Speaker, when I was growing up, we used to have significantly almost sufficient forest cover in the mountains and the hills around Kitui. Today, Mr. Speaker, much of that forest cover has been cut down completely, Mr. Speaker, and people are burning charcoal and selling to urban centers. We are precipitating the process of turning our region into a desert. And the people that do this, they do it with the Speaker with their interests, purely with their interests at heart, without caring a thing about the present and future generations' ability to benefit from those resources. The Speaker, as we send money to counties for them to be able to carry out functions under devolution, this House must also expect, Mr. Speaker, that the on-sales revenue generated by counties also becomes part of the resources that are used to enrich and better the lives of the people in those counties. Mr. Speaker, as I conclude, governors must also become a little bit more innovative. Mr. Speaker, it is true and it is not right that every so often there are delays in the disbursements of money from the exchequer to counties. But Mr. Speaker, the other truth of the matter is that eventually, this money is disbursed to counties. And this money is disbursed into banks, commercial banks. When these commercial banks receive money for counties, Mr. Speaker, these monies are used by commercial banks, Mr. Speaker, to do some lending. Mr. Speaker, governors must also be a little bit more innovative and ensure that they get into agreements with commercial banks operating within their counties, Mr. Speaker, so that they have standing orders that on every 26th or 27th of every month, every member of staff in the counties are paid their dues, whether the money has been credited to the account or not, because eventually that money will come. And these banks, Mr. Speaker, do a lot of business, again, with county monies. Mr. Speaker, I want to conclude by saying that, yes, the Senate would have wanted to see 400 billion taken to counties, but now, Mr. Speaker, the available amount that the
Give him 1 minute.
Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
But the rights were really very systematic in warning you on your timing.
Mr. Speaker, but the trail of thought was also doing other things in me. So let me just conclude by saying that, yes, Mr. Speaker, we would have wanted to see 400 billion going to counties. I see now the committee has agreed on 387 billion executable share and another additional 8 billion going into counties, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, because this is a mediated version of the bill, and the report requests us, Mr. Speaker, to support that money to go to counties. Mr. Speaker, with those remarks, I support.
You know, this screen of mine is funny. It was blank, but now it has a member by the name of Moses Senator Kajwang. You know, the mood was the mover to reply. That was the mood of the House. But maybe you raise a few minutes to give your comments on it's a very important bill for the counties.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Division of Revenue Bill is the most important financial instrument that this House considers. Every senator, if they are committed to their sense of duty, ought to have a view on the division of revenue, because this is where we are demonstrating to the people that we represent that the money that governors are using in the counties cannot pass to them without going through the Senate. Mr. Speaker, some senators in this House, I think Senator for Bungoma, has been told that he has nothing to do with the money that goes to Bungoma. It is at this point that we demonstrate that a senator, if the senator does not vote yes or no, that money will not reach Bungoma. And so, Mr. Speaker, even if the mood was for the mover to reply, I do hope that you can have a bit of elasticity so that each senator is able to explain why the amount of money their county governments base their budgets on is going to go down, and why it is likely that some hospitals are not going to have drugs, and why it is likely that some markets won't be built, roads won't be maintained, because of certain decisions that have been made here. It must be put on record, Mr. Speaker, that the first time this matter went into mediation, we were led by the senator for the great county of Meru, and who is today sitting on the chair. We had a conversation with our brothers in the lower house. We had a very scientific approach, and we were able to convince them that the right amount of money that should go to county government should not go below 400 billion. We wanted more, but we were able to convince our brothers to settle on 401 billion. And it was not voodoo, it was scientific. We could account for where every single additional shilling was going into. We were able to demonstrate that there was non-discretionary expenditure, some that was not part of the county integrated development plans over 47 counties. One such was a county aggregation and industrial parks, where each county was required to commit 250 million, and the national government would commit a similar amount. It was not the priority of all the counties. Of course, it is a very good idea, but even good ideas need to be prioritized. We had the community health professionals who had been put in place pursuant to the Primary Healthcare Act, which this House passed while sitting in Turkana. Mr. Speaker, we ended up in a situation where you had more than 100,000 community health promoters, whose salary, half would be paid by the county government and the other half by the national government. That is the most absurd arrangement I've ever seen when it comes to payment of anybody who is working for the public. Because at times, the county has paid the 5,000, and the national government has not paid the matching 5,000. And so an old woman who's a community health promoter is unable to service her SACCO loans, is unable to take her children to school because they're still waiting for the national government to send their share of her salary. I mean, Mr. Speaker, even in our households, you can imagine if you had a situation where the gardener, half his salary was to be paid by the man and half to be paid by the wife. I am sure the wife would always pay, the man would never pay. And that is the situation our community health promoters are going through, that the county governments are paying the 5,000, but there are significant delays, and that affects delivery. As we speak right now, Mr. Speaker, the governor of Homa Bay is at a dispensary called Nyakiao Health Center. Nyakiao Health Center happens to be in my village of birth. We visited that dispensary 3 days ago. and she committed to come back today, and as we speak, she's there to launch the facility. The facility has only one nurse and one other permanent employee. The rest of the services are rendered by the community health promoters. Mr. Speaker, right now, we are enrolling people into the new Universal Health Coverage Scheme, the Social Health Insurance Fund. And one significant thing that happens when people come to these facilities is that when they are enrolling into SHA, there's a means-based testing. And this is being driven and being run by our community health promoters. How do we expect these people to be motivated, to be highly driven, if here at the Senate and at the National Assembly level, we are not granting additional money or sufficient money to be able to pay for their packs? And that is why this mediated report, Mr. Speaker, I disagree with it. You know, when you approach courts of law and when you approach instruments of justice, there is always one of two outcomes. If you go to court, you either win or you lose. At the end of the day, when you lose, you might have your reservations, but you leave that court feeling that justice has been served, even though you lost. When our mediators went into that session, I do not know how the conversations went, but Mr. Speaker, in the past mediation which you and I were part of, we were able to demonstrate why 400 billion was sufficient. I do not know what other information that came in that was new that convinced them. Perhaps it is this new English that is being bandied around called fiscal deficit. But Mr. Speaker, the law had envisaged that where there is a fiscal deficit, that would be bridged by the national government. Because the national government has got the means and instruments to go to the markets, to get additional financing, to able to cater for any deficit that there could be in public spending. The national government issues treasury bills, bonds. The national government goes for concessional and unconcessional loan. The national government, when the president is in the US, the CS Treasury takes a visit to Pennsylvania Street, to IMF and World Bank, and is able to negotiate on behalf of the people of Kenya for additional financing. County governments do not have that ability. And that is why the principle, the constitutional principle of shielding counties from these drops in fiscal deficit was put there. I do not know why we have decided to throw that principle out of the window. Mr. Speaker, even though today we are voting to give counties 387 billion, or it has been proposed to give them 387 billion, the basis of division is also the financial statements of the financial year 2021-2022, if I'm not wrong. Mr. Speaker, revenue should be divided on the basis of the most recent and the most realistic revenue forecasts. I am happy with a decision that was rendered by Justice Jairus Ngaah early in October. And Mr. Speaker, this matter, I will be bringing it to the floor of the House. Justice Jairus Ngaah made a ruling recently, and he said that constitutional timelines must be adhered to without exception. Justice Jairus Ngaah made reference to Article 2294 that requires the Auditor General to bring an audit report to Parliament within 6 months of the closure of a financial year. Justice Ngaah said that timeline is mandatory, it is cast in stone, and the Auditor General must bring reports to Parliament before the 31st of December of every financial year. Justice Ngaah went ahead and spoke to Article 2298 of the Constitution. Article 2298 requires Parliament, upon receipt of the report of the Auditor General, to debate, consider, and take appropriate action on that report within 3 months. Justice Ngaah said that timeline is clearly spelled out in the Constitution. It is mandatory. It is not a suggestion. The consequence, Mr. Speaker, is that any report that is tabled before this House past 31st of December is null and void. Any report by a committee or any debate by the Senate on a matter to do with the audit reports that occurs after the expiry of 3 months is null and void. Mr. Speaker, the genesis of the matter was that the County Assembly of Nairobi indicted several officers for stealing and looting the alcoholic drinks fund. For almost 3 years, they did not prepare financial statements. And as a result, the Auditor General was not able to prepare her report on time. When the Assembly eventually got to consider the report, the Assembly made recommendations that those persons be investigated and be prosecuted for causing serious financial loss to the residents of Nairobi. Those officers of the county went to court, and in court, arguments were made, and the eventual decision was that the County Assembly of Nairobi acted outside the constitutional timelines, and therefore their report was null and void. And that the Auditor General also tabled that report outside the constitutional timelines, and therefore that audit report was null and void. Mr. Speaker, you can imagine the chaos that that decision is going to render. Even us, Senator Sotsi, in my Committee of Public Accounts Committee, we are dealing with reports outside the 3-month period. The majority leader is always tabling an audit report before this House, and many of those audit reports are tabled outside the 6-month period. We must now go back and ask ourselves how we are going to fulfill those timelines. In as much as I complain, there is only one positive thing about it. Division of revenue in the subsequent year must then be based on the most recent financial statements or on the most recent revenue statements. We will no longer be saying that because the National Assembly only adopted the 2021 revenue statement, that's a basis. It will now have to be on the basis of the revenues as audited in the financial year 2023-2024. And if we use that, then automatically counties are going to get more money way above the 387 billion. That's a positive thing about that ruling, that the pot is going to be bigger, it's going to be more recent, it's going to be more up-to-date, and 15% out of that pot definitely will exceed this amount. So even if we are going to agree with the Mediation Committee on the 387 billion, if we are going to go by Justice Nga's ruling, then the next division of revenue, counties will be entitled to much more, and there'll be no stories of fiscal deficit. But there are practical complications in implementing that decision. What do you do with 10 years of audit reports that have been brought to this House outside time? What do you do with 10 years and hundreds of reports coming from our committees that have come here outside time? Mr. Speaker, we made a resolution as a committee that the Senate needs to seek a review of that decision because the window for appeal has closed. So what Justice Jaras Nga declared, we must find ways. And as chair of the Liaison Committee, you must now start asking yourself how the two committees of accountability will be able to consider all the reports within 3 months, especially when you consider that the Auditor General brings the reports on 31st of December when you're on recess, and then the 3 months start counting from that 31st of December. Mr. Speaker, we must start thinking of the practical implications of that. So even if we are going to give the counties 387, which is more or less what they got in the other financial year, it has not taken into account the inflationary aspect. Mr. Speaker, I want to give the counties hope that if we strictly adhere to the Article 229, 4 and 8, and the other various provisions of the Public Audit Act, we'll be presenting more money to counties in the future. Mr. Speaker, we have assumed that wages in county governments should be 35% and above. And the question is, what is the authority behind that? Mr. Speaker, the IMF did a study that indicates that in the most efficient municipalities and urban areas and cities, the proportion that goes to wages is 7%. And I'll be very happy to share with senators that report of the IMF. The global standard, the gold standard, when it comes to human resource and wages is 7%. We have institutionalized 35%, which is 5 times the gold standard. And in many cases, counties are at 60%. Now that counties are receiving less money, because that is a reality, even if it's cent for cent what they received last year, What they got last year compared to this year is not the same because of inflation and other factors. So in reality, counties are getting less money. We want to encourage county governments to stop this issue of hiring people who are eventually going to be your agents, who are going to be your political campaigners in the next election, that county governments must finalize that process of rationalization of the workforce so that we can release more resources to go into development. County governments must also cut down on wastage. There's a lot of wastage in counties, Mr. Speaker. As a chair of an oversight committee, it is my view that 20% of what goes to counties is wasted. Some of it wasted not in terms of theft, but wasted in terms of redundant things and activities that do not add any value to the lives of our people. Mr. Speaker, you have seen small things that translate into big things, like a small leak in a boat that can capsize it. The grandeur, the podiums, the entourage, the protocol around some of our governors, if you're going to put it all together, Mr. Speaker, it will translate into billions of shillings. What if we just became servant leaders and dropped the showbiz and dropped some of those protocol things that incur unnecessary additional resources? County governments would be able to redirect more to much more useful processes. Mr. Speaker, because we sent out our team to mediate, I will need to be convinced that this is the best outcome that we could get. Mr. Speaker, because my county of Homa Bay is bound to lose out on what had originally been promised, the county had already done a budget, and now they have to do a supplementary budget even before the first budget has been implemented. Mr. Speaker, I am generally against this decision of the Mediation Committee. Mr. Speaker, I will need to be convinced further, and I'm just giving notice that I do not agree with the spirit of this report. I think that the Senate got the short end of the stick because we must always look out for the interests of counties and their governments, and it was my view that 400 billion was the irreducible minimum which county governments ought to get. But the silver lining is that Justice Jairus Ngaah is the disruptor. We can blame him for giving a ruling that sounds impractical, but he has disrupted our processes. We must now make sure that within 3 months, the National Assembly has audited and has considered the revenue reports so that we can share with counties the most recent revenues as collected by the National Treasury and the other agencies without hiding behind fiscal deficit. Mr. Speaker, I disagree with this report.
Thank you, Senator. I have Senator Sotsi, I have Senator Koiti, who are still queuing to speak to this particular bill. Senator Okoiti Omtata.
Mr. Speaker, sir, thank you for the opportunity to address the House. I stand to oppose the decision to reduce the amount of money going to the counties from 400 billion shillings. Counties, Mr. Speaker, are struggling. They carry a lot of work that they do. And even as we speak right now, a lot of devolved functions don't have the resources to be implemented or to be carried out. Money has remained in the national government, and yet resources have been devolved. On that premise alone, I would not be willing to touch whatever it is that has been allocated to the counties, and especially given that even the audits that are forming the basis of the allocation are dated. They are so many years behind time. So we are not even being realistic in the way we are going. Number two, I'm yet to see a formula by which DORA can be revised. And as Senator Kajwang has just observed that a reduction to the amount of money going to counties is going to cause a difficult situation on the ground. Counties have passed budgets based on the allocations they were given, and now we want counties to go back and supplement those budgets. But even when supplementing the budgets, they have an obligation to be faithful to the law, whereby they can only supplement the budgets by not more than 10% per item. So we're inviting counties to be in a situation whereby they may have to break the law. As regards the decision of Justice Nga, which I allowed, the 3 months within which the reports of the Auditor General should be approved by Parliament are basically cast in stone unless we amend the Constitution. And I think it's time we try to have fidelity to the Constitution so that things can work like clockwork. Because this business of saying that the Constitution is being implemented piecemeal or haphazardly is the reason why this Constitution looks a bit difficult to implement. If we were faithful to the Constitution and implemented it 100%, we'd find ourselves in a situation whereby it has a working mechanism whereby none of its parts is a burden to the other. But even if you come to a situation whereby it's not properly implemented, it's like having a very, very powerful machine. Even a 2,000 monster machine. But the wheels are deflated. That machine cannot work. However hard the engine roars, it cannot work. So let us implement this Constitution fully. And I personally allowed Justice Nga for the ruling he made. It's upon us to pull up our socks. We can apply for some review to institute some structural interdicts whereby the court can maybe give us some dispensation for some time within which we can catch up. But we must focus on dealing with these audits and make sure that the audits are looked at by Parliament within time so that county governments can get their rightful share of the equitable fund. Mr. Speaker, the issues, there have been arguments that our county officials, the governors, the speakers, the clerks, members of national assemblies, the AECs, and what have you, are misappropriating funds and therefore should not be funded. Let us not mix two things. There's law enforcement. Where they misappropriate funds, Article 226, Clause 5 of the Constitution is very clear that anybody who misuses public funds or under whose care public funds are lost is liable whether they are in office or out of office. Let that be implemented, and let us not get this argument that is usually thrown up that counties are abusing the money they get. Yes, they are abusing the money they get, and the law must take its course. And that's a challenge to our law enforcement, the EACC, the DCI, the judiciary, and others. Let them step up to the plate and make sure that rogue governors, rogue speakers, and any rogue county official is held accountable for the money that the counties lose. And also going forward, Mr. Speaker, in terms of public funds utilized by counties, I think that accounting officers should be appearing before the committees of parliament, not just the governor. And the Auditor General should be ensuring that these accounting officers present their accounts by 30th of September. By end of September, they present their accounts to the Auditor General, and then by 30th of October, the CECs of Finance present their statements also to their global statements to the Auditor General. Generally, you'll find that most audit reports refer to the global report of the CEC Finance and hardly refer to any reports that were delivered by the various accounting officers of the various entities in the county governments. So maybe we should get to a point whereby it's not the governors that we put to task, only governors. We should also put to task these accounting officers to explain how they utilize public funds, so that this blame game that goes on that counties are dysfunctional and what have you do not come up. And that way, maybe the hearings before PIC and the PAC will be able to trace the money to the real people who signed off the checks, other than the person who has political responsibility, being the governor. So I would really plead that as we grill the governors, we should also be able to grill the accounting officers of the various county departments to account for how money is utilized and used. That way we shall be able to go deeper into the counties and demand accountability for cash from each department, and not just waiting for the political responsibility of the governor. Mr. Speaker, I really beg this House to reject this report so that we can go back to the position whereby we had already passed the DORA, and if there to be any adjustments, the adjustment should come from the budget of the national government, not the budget of county governments, because it is the national government that is holding a lot of money that belongs to counties, like in agriculture. A lot of money is still being held in Nairobi. It has not followed devolved functions, and farmers are not benefiting from the promise of devolution that they would benefit from had the national government devolved the funds that go with the functions. We are having the same with the health sector. The national government continues to hang on to vital services or vital funds that should be providing services at the county level. And so it's really unacceptable that with the national government already holding money belonging to counties, we again want to say that the deficit that has occurred should be shared equally between the counties, or should be shared in some measure between the counties and the national government. I urge this House, and I plead with my fellow members, to reject this mediation report so that the little the counties were getting is not messed up with. Because in some counties, some counties that are even smaller than my own Busia, allocations are very small. And then we are going again to reduce them. I plead with this House, my fellow senators, that we circle our wagons, close ranks, be bipartisan in approach, and shoot down this report, and go back to the position whereby the money that was allocated to the counties is not interfered with. The money is so little, given what the counties need to do. And I reiterate, if there are governors who are messing up with that money, it's not the reason why the money should not be given to county governments. In your own house, for those who still have babies, if you have a maid, and the maid is eating Cerelac that is meant for your child, you don't stop buying Cerelac because the maid eats Cerelac. You deal with the maid. You fire the maid. You don't stop buying Cerelac for your baby because the maid eats Cerelac. So if governors are messing up with the county funds, if county assemblies are messing up with the county funds, let law enforcement do its duty. Let law enforcement intervene and deal with these rogues. But the money that this House allocates for the people on the ground in our counties must remain sacrosanct. It must not be touched, because that is where the rubber meets the road. The national government has a lot of corners where it can get money, where it can make haircuts, and be able to still balance its budget. The county governments, first of all, the money are going to the county governments. The way it is handled by this House, we don't have cases of budgeted corruption in the DORA. There's no budgeted corruption there. The money is really worked out meticulously, and it is meticulously tied to the needs of counties, almost as a way you prescribe rare medicine for a rare disease. So I really plead with this House that we reject this report, and we make sure that what was allocated to the counties, because it was not based on the current finances of government, it was based on some couple of years back, is not interfered with, and the national government looks for haircuts in other sections, and especially that money that you have refused to devolve. It can look at that and see, because the counties are doing the functions, it can make cuts without crippling its operations. With those few remarks, I ask the majority leader to lead us in rejecting this negotiated position, so that we can fly the flag of devolution high and be able to have some chance at realizing the objectives of devolution. With those few remarks, yes.
Senator Okoiti, are you done?
No, there's a point of order was raised, so now just about to
The Speaker has not allowed Senator Ojwang to, but what is your point of order, Senator Kajwang?
Mr. Speaker, is it in order for Senator Mtata to direct the leader of majority to take certain actions and make certain decisions? Yet, just this afternoon, he has launched his exploratory committee to be the next president of Kenya. He could just wait to be the president, and then he gives the county more money. So why would he want Senator Cheriot to go and do the right things that will make his president popular and deny him votes? So is it in order for him to shoot himself in the foot on the floor of the House? Or is he taking Kenyans for a ride with his presidential ambitions, Mr. Speaker?
I'm very sure you listened to Senator Okoiti, and as he was just about to close, he made reference to those few remarks. Yet he's been on the floor for more than 25 minutes plus or so. I'm sure even the extent of his directive to the majority leader probably would also be one of those jokes that as a leader, he does it in form of the normal banter. But Senator Okoiti, please conclude so that other members are allowed to speak.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, sir. It is true that I want to be President of the Republic of Kenya. And when I'm President of the Republic of Kenya, things like this will not happen, because I will have separated the Treasury from the Ministry of Finance, and the Treasury will be run professionally. And we shall enter an era of balanced budgets. There will be no deficits. With those few remarks, I oppose this bill, this report. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Thank you, Senator Omtata. Senator Osotsi, Godfrey Atieno, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to also comment on this very important bill, the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill 2024 and the Mediation Committee report. Mr. Speaker, just like my two colleagues who have spoken before me, I, from the onset, declare that I am going to oppose this report. Because, Mr. Speaker, I'm in this House because of Article 96 of the Constitution, which is to protect counties and their government. And, Mr. Speaker, we will be setting a wrong precedent as a House, that we pass DORA, and that is one of the major constitutional powers that we have as a Senate. We pass a DORA, and then it is brought back to us to adjust the figures downwards, and we easily agree to that. That, Mr. Speaker, it is not something that we should entertain as a Senate. We are here to protect devolution, and by all ways, Mr. Speaker, this decision to reduce the shareable revenue from 400 billion that we had passed to now 387 billion. It is going to be unprecedented, and it will make those enemies of Senate who have been saying Senate has no space in this country to have a case, Mr. Speaker, to have a justification. I am opposed to that. And Mr. Speaker, I listened to the President speak the other day. And in his speech, which we are debated today, one fundamental thing that he said that there has been a rise in revenue levels. He said that, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if there has been a rise in revenue, national revenues, why are we being told a different story here? We are being told that the revenue, we have a revenue shortfall. So if there is a rise, which has been communicated to this House by the head of state and is in our record, why would this House go for a lower figure when there is a rise in revenues? Mr. Speaker, because of that contradiction, that in this report they are talking of a shortfall, but the head of state, who is in charge of government, is talking about a rise in revenue. Because of that contradiction, Mr. Speaker, I will not support this report. I will reject it, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the National Assembly has not reduced the allocation to CDF. They have not touched CDF. Why is it that they are agreeing to lower the figure for counties and CDF remains untouched? We are going to look so bad before our own people as senators that the members of the National Assembly have their way on CDF, but senators, we don't have our way. So what is our role as a Senate? So, Mr. Speaker, again on that note, I will reject this report. Mr. Speaker, the DORA 2024, under Section 5, it says very clearly that in case of a revenue shortfall, it shall be borne by the national government. Similarly, in case of excess revenue collection, it shall accrue to the national government and may be used to reduce the deficit or defray public debt. Mr. Speaker, because of this reason, I will reject this report. Because if the revenues have gone down, that should not be a burden of counties, that should be a burden of the national government to look for ways of managing the shortfall. Mr. Speaker, the additional funding that we sought, that took us to 400 billion shillings was meant to deal with the additional funding that was required as a result of policies that were introduced by the national government. For example, the housing levy, Mr. Speaker, the enhanced NSSF contribution, the issue of counterpart funding for community health promoters, and also the county aggregation and industrial park. Mr. Speaker, this has enhanced the budgetary requirement of our counties. And because of that, this Senate thought it was wise that we peg the figure at 400 billion. Mr. Speaker, if we go to 387 billion, it means we will not have resolved this problem, Mr. Speaker, of the additional expenditure as a result of national government policies. But, Mr. Speaker, because of that, again, I will reject this report. Mr. Speaker, having said that, I know there is a lot of argument. Every time people want to deny counties money, they say there are governance and accountability problems in our county. Yes, we agree, they are. But we cannot use that as the main justification of denying our counties money. The Constitution is very clear that 15% of the national revenues should go to the counties. So we cannot use that as a basis of denying our counties money. And Mr. Speaker, you know, it is becoming very difficult to manage our counties. I know they have accountability problems, but again, it's becoming very difficult because, one, there is delay in disbursing money from Treasury to CRF, and then when the money gets to CRF, there is another office in this country called the Controller of Budget. Mr. Speaker, counties are spending millions of money traveling from their counties just to come and submit papers seeking approval for requisition, when the Controller of Budget has officers in every county. What are they doing in that county? Mr. Speaker, why has the Controller of Budget not automated that office so that those operations that counties come to do to Nairobi, they can do it online and have their requisitions processed online? But, Mr. Speaker, the office of the Controller of Budget is a crime scene. It's a crime scene, Mr. Speaker, where the CEC for Finance, the CEOs for Finance carry millions of money to come and bribe officers at the Controller of Budget so that their requisitions are passed. I have met so many CECs in this town, Mr. Speaker, who are desperate, staying here for days, chasing their requisition. Why can't this office be made efficient?
Senator
Why
Mandago.
Can't this office be accountable to the
Senator
people of
Osotsi.
Kenya, Mr. Speaker?
Senator Osotsi, there is a point of order from Senator Mandago.
Mandago can inform me.
It's actually a point of order. Senator
But he cannot oppose.
I'm sorry, Senator Otsosi, I'm not informing you, but I'm rising on a point of order on Standing Order 105 on the statement of facts. You know, Honorable Speaker, when the Senator for Vihiga makes sweeping statements that millions of money is being carried to bribe officers from the Controller of Budget, can he table evidence, Honorable Speaker? It is not that all officers in the Controller of Budget are corrupt unless he tables evidence, and if he has that evidence, Honorable Speaker, he knows there are institutions in this country mandated to act on those matters. Honorable Speaker, I think members should not use the floor because of the parliamentary privileges to make sweeping statements on institutions, because those who serve in those institutions have also spent a fortune of their lifetime building a career. Where there is, Otsosi should provide evidence instead of making a wholesale statement that affects the whole institution, which is also a constitutional institution. Thank you, Speaker.
Senator Osotsi, I remind you of the standing order number 1 of 5 on responsibility for statement of fact. And this is what it says: a senator shall be responsible for the accuracy of any facts that the senator alleges to be true and may be required to substantiate any such facts instantly. With your reference to the millions of money that is being taken around by CECs and CEOs to bribe the officers from the controller of budget, that is what the point of order that Madago is saying. Are you able to substantiate?
Mr. Speaker, Senator Mandago has been a governor, and I think he needs to be honest to himself. I cannot substantiate the obvious, Mr. Speaker. I have heard that from several governors who have complained about that office, that nothing moves until the hands of some people are greased. And Mr. Speaker, on this one, I cannot substantiate. And I cannot withdraw, Mr. Speaker, because this is the obvious. And this is, I'm saying this because my role under Article 96 is to protect counties. And one of the biggest challenges in this country is that office of the controller of budget. We either reform that office or we remove that office from the Constitution, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that it is important that the National Assembly assist this country by making sure that devolution works. There is an attitude in the National Assembly that counties are competing them in terms of development. Mr. Speaker, I think it's important that our member colleagues in the National Assembly appreciate the
Senator
contribution of devolution to this country, Mr. Speaker.
Allow Senator Osotsi to conclude on his remarks, unless it's very critical. Proceed.
Mr. Speaker, for protection of the integrity of the House, especially the chair allowed the point of order by the Senator of Washington Gishu, requesting that Senator Osotsi substantiates his allegations. Instead of putting the evidence that Senator Mandago requested for, he has told you he can't substantiate the obvious. So we are waiting for your ruling. You rule
Senator,
so that the House, personally,
Harwale,
I was waiting for evidence to show that Margaret Nyakiango is corrupt.
he actually has admitted that he cannot substantiate that statement. He did that.
Yes.
He did that.
Then he said he will not withdraw and he will not apologize. So help us.
Senator Osotsi, in your confirmation that you cannot substantiate the allegation that money is shared from among the officers who are oiling the officers of the controller of budget, in the absence of any substantiation, you have got no option but to withdraw that particular statement.
Mr. Speaker, on the basis that I cannot be able to produce the hard evidence in this House, I'll withdraw. But I want the House to get it very clearly that there is a problem at that office and we cannot deny it. We know it exists. But one day, someone doing his job will have to get the evidence and the evidence will be produced. Yes, he can inform me.
Senator Kajwang, proceed to inform me.
Mr. Speaker, the issue of people going to the Control of Budgets office with envelopes has been there. But I want to inform Senator Osotsi that there's something called Form C, and it's a real form in that workflow. At the very minimum, the CEC Finance will be carrying Form C. So, Senator Osotsi, it might not be very useful for us to appear as if we are castigating a constitutional office. But I can tell you that that Form C is the one that needs to be eliminated from that process. Because as long as the CEC Finance must carry Form C from Lamu to Nairobi, it then creates wrong impressions of rent seeking. And we must help the control of budget to automate the process, to automate the workflows, to gain visibility into the contents of accounts of county governments so that we get rid of the Form C. And Senator Osotsi, I do not know whether sometimes you do this when you go to withdraw money from your bank account, because counties are going to withdraw money from their account. Sometimes you can be served nicely by the lady teller. She smiles nicely at you. She walks up and down in a manner that entices you, so that once you have withdrawn your money, you can give her a 1,000 shilling in appreciation. I hope that is not the instances you're referring to as millions exchanging hands, but from where I sit, that Form C must be eliminated so that nobody, like Senator Murango, walks around with brown envelopes going to the Control of Budget's office. But, Mr. Speaker, the Control of Budget as a constitutional office bearer, this House should never be seen to be casting aspersions on her conduct.
Senator Osotsi, you are informed. You may proceed to...
Thank you for that information, Senator Kajwang. Indeed, Senator Kajwang has informed me on the aspect of the CECs having to come to Nairobi with that form, because it doesn't make sense, Mr. Speaker, that we have officers of the Control of Budget who are in our counties, working with our counties. They see those requisitions in the counties, and they still have to, the CECs have still to bring those documents in Nairobi for further processing. It doesn't make sense. Counties, for example, have stayed for almost 1 month waiting for their requisitions to be approved, Mr. Speaker. It doesn't make sense at all. Mr. Speaker, with those few remarks, I want to say I reject this report.
Senator Mandago Jackson.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, from the onset, I rise to support this report by the Committee of Finance, Honorable Speaker, on the division of revenue between counties. Honorable Speaker, as much as we have the responsibility of protecting counties and devolution as a Senate, we must also be realistic, Honorable Speaker, to the circumstances and the happenings within the country. Honorable Speaker, this House had passed, and National Assembly had agreed with us that counties can receive 400 billion shillings for the current financial year, Honorable Speaker. But, Honorable Speaker, the unprecedented events that happened in this country is what has necessitated the change, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, the finance bill that had been passed by Parliament had put in revenue-raising measures that would then have ensured that counties would be able to receive what we as Senate had passed. Honorable Speaker, therefore, the mediation committee from the Senate, led by the Chair of Finance, in my view, Honorable Speaker, have done a tremendous job by making sure that the reduction was not what the National Assembly had proposed of 380 billion, but reached a consensus of 387 billion, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, considering the months we have to the end of the financial year and the time we have to collect revenue to be able to fill in the gap that we had envisaged, Honorable Speaker, it's only reasonable and practical that as a Senate, we consider the amount that the mediation committee has come up with to enable our counties to function, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, it is possible, and I say this from experience as a governor, that it is possible for you to be allocated a very high figure on the paper, but it becomes impossible for that money to be dispersed, Honorable Speaker. And what does that do, Honorable Speaker? Because we have another monster we have been grappling with as a Senate, and even as even national government too, and county governments, the aspect of pending bills, Honorable Speaker. Most of the pending bills we have in counties and in national government has been caused by overestimating the revenues and the income you are going to receive. Honorable Speaker, we shall put suppliers of goods and services to counties in jeopardy if, as I said it, we are going to insist that counties receive 400 billion, which our national revenues may not be able to raise. We shall make counties commit suppliers and contractors to works whom they will not be able to pay, Honorable Speaker. We cannot solve a problem by creating another problem, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, therefore, I want to persuade my colleagues, Honorable Senators, that indeed we have a mandate to protect devolution, and that protection of devolution includes making sure that we are realistic, that the suppliers and contractors in the counties will be paid by voting in revenues that will be accessed and that will be available, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, it should not be lost on us that the very, very same people who are against the revenue-raising measures would still also want for increase of share of revenue to counties. Honorable Speaker, as Kenyans, we must begin having a very honest conversation, particularly when it comes to development. We have a choice as Kenyans, and we make a decision and say, let's reduce the taxes that we are paying, but then let us also reduce the expectation in terms of development, both from county governments and from national government. And we therefore have to live within the revenues that we shall be able to raise, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, on the issue of release of funds, and we appreciate that there has been a delay in disbursement to counties, Honorable Speaker, and I want to agree with Senator Okiya Omtata, Honorable Speaker, that the National Treasury, the current National Treasury as set, behaves and acts as an agent of national government. National Treasury, Honorable Speaker, in fact, I think as a House, we should begin considering amendments to the PFM Act and make the National Treasury independent treasury, and we have an independent Ministry of Finance for national government, Honorable Speaker, so that the National Treasury can then serve the two levels of government fairly, equitably, and in a manner that promotes the two levels of government growth. Honorable Speaker, as it is, when it comes to disbursement of funds, priority is being given by National Treasury to national government, Honorable Speaker. I say this from experience. You would find salaries for county government staff delaying while their counterparts in national government receive their salaries earlier than even 30th of every month, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, National Treasury should realize that they are a National Treasury that serves both two levels of government, and they must make sure they are fair in their processes. Honorable Speaker, the other problem that comes when, with disbursement of funds is the issue of this IFMI system, that the officers in the National Treasury has made it almost impossible for that. I don't know whether the system is old, it needs to be re-engineered or needs to be done away with and we get another system. The downtime of that system, especially when it comes towards the end of the financial year, Honorable Speaker, has always been almost 50–60% in making it difficult for counties to be able to pay their suppliers, their contractors on time because of the downtime that is experienced through IFMIS. But Honorable Speaker, the downtime of IFMIS sometimes has been used by National Treasury actually to manage disbursement to counties. Honorable Speaker, we don't want the culture that we have seen in the past in National Treasury. The funds to counties must be disbursed on time. We don't want the National Treasury that makes sure every 30th of June of every year, they begin publishing in the daily newspapers the amounts of money available in the county revenue accounts, money that was sent a day or 3 days to the end of the financial year, and expecting counties to expend those funds within the 3 days, Honorable Speaker. Therefore, Honorable Speaker, as a Senate, we should amend the Public Finance Management Act to make sure that the National Treasury is independent and makes it possible for counties to access money on time. Honorable Speaker, on the issue of the Office of the Controller of Budget, I want to agree with my colleague, Senator Kajwang, that the inefficiencies that we have in the Controller of Budgets Office is a system issue, is a process issue. And we need to have a conversation with the Controller of Budget on automation of the processes. And Honorable Speaker, counties should then be able to use the automated processes to requisition funds and eliminate the aspect of traveling. Honorable Speaker, the traveling to the Controller of Budget is not limited to the requirement by the Controller of Budget. Sometimes counties and officers within the Department of Treasury in counties, Honorable Speaker, use it as an opportunity to get a chance to travel out, Honorable Speaker. And you know the motivation of traveling to Nairobi, Honorable Speaker, is very high. This being the capital city of the Republic of Kenya, and you know also the allowances are fairly good. We are happy ourselves as a county of Uasin Gishu that now Eldoret is a city, so that Otsotsi and Vihiga County can take their conferences to Eldoret, Honorable Speaker, and also boost tourism, Honorable Speaker. Therefore, the problem of traveling is not really necessarily just limited to the issue of the Controller of Office, but we must also, as a Senate, interrogate the travel by counties, whether really they are related. People could be, officers could be traveling in the excuse of going to the Controller of Budget, yet they have actually no issues to transact at the Controller of Budget's office. So I therefore, Honorable Speaker, want to say I support, and I want to persuade my colleagues that we support this report by the Mediation Committee led by our Chair of Finance here at the Senate, so that our counties can be able to access funds. Honorable Speaker, we do appreciate that we have very little time. If counties have to achieve the targets they have set for this financial year, then the sooner we clear this to make the funds available to them, the better. But we must also say that our counties have not been performing as expected, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, when you look at the functions that are devolved and what has been done for the first financial year, second financial year, there's a big challenge. I'll tell you, Honorable Speaker, in my own county, Honorable Speaker, for the last 2 financial years, there is no single ECD classroom that has been constructed, and funds have always been voted for construction of ECDs. We therefore want to urge our governors to be hands-on in monitoring the implementation of the county programs and make sure that the funds that we allocate as Senate and Senator counties are then utilized to offer services to the respective citizens of the counties, Honorable Speaker. With that, I beg to support this report, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Mandago. Senator Margaret Kamar.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the opportunity. May I start by supporting the report? I support the report dominantly because we don't want to give our governors any excuses. Our governors have been giving us excuses. We don't have money, so we have not paid this and that. And yet we know that the process of development in a county is such that you must have an annual plan. And if governors truly have annual plans, they only plan for the money that they have. And we should not be having a lot of pending bills. So the pending bills have been one excuse, and we don't want to be part of that excuse. So I would support that we get the money released so that the governors can move on and get things going. But all the same, Mr. Speaker, I still think that we have not given counties enough money up to now from the inception of devolution, because it is a fact that we have functions in Schedule 4 of the Constitution, and those functions are different for the national government and the county government. And it's extremely important that we start ensuring that money follows functions. It is therefore very important that when we are dividing the money, we actually don't just divide arbitrarily, but we make sure that the functions are funded according to what we are right now. In fact, if we did that, Mr. Speaker, we may not need new money. All we need to do is to shrink the Ministry of Agriculture accordingly, because there are people who have not been devolved even when agriculture was devolved. The same thing with the Ministry of Health. The Ministry of Health was devolved dominantly, but the personnel we have in Afia House are still intact. So we need to ask ourselves, what is it we devolved, and then we follow it with the money. And if we did that, that may not even require new money. It may just require that we relocate the money to where the function has gone. Mr. Speaker, that is very important because for you to be able to account for any function, you must have the right budget to cover the same function. So for that, I really would insist to this House that for the future, we need to sit early, we need to discuss early, and we need to make sure that we do that, we make money follow functions. Mr. Speaker, this House is a house of oversight, and we must make sure that we do what is required of us. Mr. Speaker, I would like to go to the other side again and thank His Excellency, the President, for the speech that he made on Thursday, because it touches also on what we are doing in Dora. In the funding that, in the speech of the President, he did locate money where he was emphasizing the development of the government. And it is very important, again, that we read through so that we spend according to what we think we are going to fulfill. Mr. Speaker, in his speech, the President touched on university funding, and I want to touch on that because I came from there before I joined politics. And the current university funding model is a model that, if it is understood by all, it's a very good model. The model that we have been given is a unit cost model, that the cost of doing law is different from the cost of doing medicine. And it's very important that we recognize that. For many years, the universities have been given a global fund according to the number of students that they have. When that is done, it is very difficult even for the universities to attract students from outside. So most universities have shied away from attracting students from outside this nation because the fee they would give would be completely different from the fee that we have. And if you look at the East African community privileges, it is very clear that students in the East African community partner states are supposed to pay the local fees. Now, in Kenya, if you have a student paying local fees in medicine, you will have a very cheap program for a very expensive program. So they'll pay very little, and yet the program is very expensive. So it is very important that the right costing is done for the university programs, and I think that's exactly what this model is doing. Once the costing has been done, then the government will give its own scholarships and grants, as well as any support that they would like to give in terms of scholarships to students. That is completely a different story altogether. It does not mean that if you have the right costing for a program, that you'll pay the same. You will not have to pay that if the government is paying for you. And that's exactly what this model is doing. What has never been done is to explain this model. It would have been very good to have public participation on the new funding model so that it's exposed to everybody. I sit in the Committee of Education, and even as a Committee of Education, we are having problems trying to understand exactly how the model was until we got the minister to come and explain to us. So that model, I would like to support the President's approach. I support so many other things that he gave in his speech. The other one that I want to mention, Mr. Speaker, is the issue of a university called Moi University. Moi University is the second university in this country. And the problems and the challenges of Moi University are not being analyzed properly. Moi University gave birth to 12 universities. And in giving birth to 12 universities, it spent its own internal resources. Mr. Speaker, it will surprise you that the mother university, called University of Nairobi, refused to mother small universities. They had one or two, maybe Kenya Science and Technical University only, because they knew the implication financially. More university vice chancellors have been extremely generous. And in their generosity, they even took loans for universities. And in fact, we are trying to see in our committee if we can table those figures, because it is important for the country to know that it has nothing to do with mismanagement. It has to do with generosity of the vice chancellors. So the vice chancellors of Moi University gave birth. They started by giving birth to Maseno University, Masinde Muliro University, Kisi University, Narok University, Karatina University, Mamangina University, all sorts everywhere, talk of every corner of this country, including Garissa, which was the baby that they had. And in all those universities, they actually released money to their own investment. It is very important that this analysis is done properly so that Moi University is paid or refunded the money that they spend in the baby universities. Because in their generosity, they have brought everything to a standstill. In their generosity, members of staff are suffering today because their statutories are not being paid, their loans are not being paid, out of generosity of a vice chancellor who did not do the maths that the other universities have done. If you look at the universities that were nursed by KU, there may be 3. The universities that were nursed by Jomo Kenyatta, there may be also about 3. But talk of one more university that nursed 12 universities. There is no way they would have survived. This was a time bomb. It has now arrived. It is at our footstep, it's at the doorstep now, and it has to be sorted out. So even as we are looking at the unit costs of universities, we also need to look at the things that have made the universities not to perform the way they are supposed to perform. Mr. Speaker?
Point of information. Senator
Yes.
Professor Kamara, you...
My student of Moi University, I will take.
Very well. Senator Kajwang, please proceed to inform Senator
Thank you,
Kamara.
Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Professor Kamar, because she is my teacher, my senior. And I wanted to inform Professor Kamar, who, for the record, when I was at Moi University, she was a very, very highly regarded administrator at Chepkwelel campus. And Mr. Speaker, what I wanted to inform Senator Kamar, when the president came here last week, he said that the challenges at Moi University are governance problems, and that the problems at Moi University are unique. They might not be similar to the problems of University of Nairobi or the funding model as applied to the other institutions, which means that the problem is localized to the council, because it is the university council that has the responsibility of making certain decisions of financial administrative nature. Mr. Speaker, when I was at Moi University, I was the Secretary General, so I would represent the students in the Senate, and I would represent the students in the University Council. And the council that has made the decisions that Senator Kamar has referred to, which she refers to as generosity, and I thought she would refer to it as irresponsibility, still seems to be in the office, in office, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I wanted to inform you that that university, which you worked so hard for, in an era where tribalism was not a factor, the Vice Chancellor, our time, was Professor Rafael Munavu, a man from Ukambani. We had Professor Ole Karei, a man from Narok. We had my own faculty, Professor Kefa Sodini, a man from Western. At the biggest school of social studies, we had Professor Akonga. Mr. Speaker, it was never about the tribe. You didn't have to be one of the boys to be an administrator or to be a dean, to be a head of a department. So I just wanted to inform Professor Kamar that there seems to have been something that went wrong after you left Moi University, that instead of it becoming the bastion for intellectual discourse, it became the bastion for tribal loyalties. And also, Professor Kamar, be informed that a great university decided to buy donkeys to replace tractors. A university that is supposed to train engineers, to train lawyers, to train people who are supposed to run this nation, makes the decision that these tractors are too expensive, let us buy donkeys. So, Mr. Speaker, I wanted to inform Professor Kamar of the things that have happened since the days when her and her team ensured that Moi University was a university of choice, and before Governor Mandago became the governor of Uasin Gishu.
Professor Kamar, you've been informed. Kindly proceed to
Thank
make
you.
your contributions. So that
I just wanted to mention that the information is a little bit confusing from my student. It is confusing because it is true that there are governance issues, not just in Moi University, but in all universities in Kenya as we are talking. I just also wanted to mention...
Senator Professor Kamara, Senator Mandago would like to inform you further.
Okay.
Senator Wambua as well. Are you ready to be informed? Very well, Senator Mandago.
Honorable Speaker, I wanted to inform Professor Kamar that she's being misinformed by Senator Kajwang. To the extent that, Honorable Speaker, the citation of various vice chancellors, past vice chancellors from Moi University, Senator Kajwang is trying to drive a certain narrative that I've said in this House I'll be very firm. What Senator Kajwang has conveniently done is to hide the fact that since 2003, Moi University was systematically starved of funds. To the extent that this year, as we sit here, Honorable Speaker, Moi University was just allocated a paltry 5,000 students at the expense of a capacity of 14,000. So Senator Kamar, my learned professor, don't be misinformed by your student who has chosen to take leave.
Senator Wambua had equally requested that he informs you. Proceed, Senator Wambua.
Mr. Speaker, I would rather you just allow the professor and our students to engage on this matter and leave alone other people who are pretenders to the throne, Mr. Speaker. But I respect Senator Madago. Only that he is also trying to misinform my teacher. Mr. Speaker, I want to inform my teacher, Professor Kamar, that she should go back in memory lane and remember where we left Moi University. And Moi University then being called the fountain of knowledge. And that, Mr. Speaker, when we went to Moi University and when she was my teacher at the Moi University, it was never an issue who the Vice Chancellor of Moi University would be, where they come from, or what their qualifications are, for as long as they are qualified to be Vice Chancellors in that university. Mr. Speaker, we were there under Professor Kerr, were there under Professor Karei, Professor Munavu, Everest Tanda, and it was never an issue where these fine vice chancellors came from. The Speaker, from the time that conversations around the office of the vice chancellor at Moi University began to take a route of negative ethnicity, that university, Mr. Speaker, today is a pale shadow of what it used to be. Mr. Speaker, I submit.
Senator Professor Kamar, I hope you haven't been misinformed or confused by your other students.
My students are even confusing it also further. But I'm going to help them, Mr. Speaker. Because I'm in the Committee of Education, we want to bring some things to make things very clear. Because there are things that are governance issues which exist and we cannot deny in any university. Once upon a time, I was a minister in irrigation. During my time, the President Kibaki started 15 universities. In the 15 universities, Mr. Speaker, the one that was started in Jaramogi Odinga, the tribe was from the village. The one that was started in Kitui, where my other student comes from, also came from there. The one that was started in Karatina, the professor that became the vice chancellor came from there. There was something about having the confidence of the people. I don't know what it was, but always people ran home for interviews. And they ran home for interviews. In fact, Moi University should be congratulated. It is the one that did not have somebody from the neighborhood for a very long time. I think the current vice chancellor is the first one that came from that neighborhood. We started from Odiambo, we went to Kea, one was from South Nyanza, another one from North Nyanza. I call it North Nyanza because it's the opposite of the lake. And Moi University has not had those. So let's not use the tribe, because I know if somebody says I oversaw tribal installations, it actually happened at that time that the people who went back home for interviews, you talk of Masinde Muliro, and the people who go home for interviews are actually from the neighborhood. And we did not mind, so long as the chairman of council was from outside. And these universities came to prominence. But I love my students because they love the university. They would not be talking if they did not love Moi University. So for that, I really appreciate their comments. But as a Committee of Education, we'll be able to get the facts. We'll be able to give you the figures so that we actually start to understand. But I can tell you for a fact that Moi University became a victim of being too generous. If that generosity was part of mismanagement, it was. Because that's exactly what happened. It's spreading all the way to Garissa. In fact, I personally even opposed Garissa. And I said, let Jomo Kenyatta, which is nearer to Garissa, go to Garissa. But at the end of the day, who fought for this? Members of parliament from Garissa. We are fighting for Moi University to go to Garissa. Because again, Moi University students love the institution. So a member of parliament who was a former member of Moi University staff said, no, I don't want any other university. So we have had these issues, and some of us as parliamentarians have also affected the way the university is run, because we are either fighting for promotion, like in the 15, we had 5 that were actually as a product, as a result of members of parliament fighting to have universities. Nothing was wrong with it because we needed universities. Our students did not have enough space. But we need to really critically look at that. I only say that Moi University was a victim because it spent too much money that was not its own money. And it would be nice to step on that in this house so that all of us get to understand, and then we deal with the mismanagement issues. Mr. Speaker, I support this report. Let's continue to get money to go to where the functions are. Let's increase the amount of money that goes to counties, because the functions are being increased. With those remarks, I support, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Professor Kamar, for your contribution. And now, honorable members, there being no other senator who is desirous of contributing to this particular report, I call upon Senator Mogatana, who is the mover of the bill, of the motion report, to reply.
Mr. Speaker, may I take this opportunity to really sincerely thank honorable senators who made very impassioned contribution to this report. Mr. Speaker, when I moved this report, I said that this is one of the most important constitutional mandate that any senator who is elected from his county knows he must execute. And Mr. Speaker, every one of us, with exception of those who have probably traveled on official duty, was able to put the issues that were captured in that report. Mr. Speaker, I respect the diversity of opinion that was expressed in the debate, and I listened carefully to every senator who spoke to this report. Mr. Speaker, as I reply, I think I'm better informed now than even when I was moving this report. So I really, truly thank honorable members and the Council of Governors. I believe the governors are listening. The message is clear. Members of the Senate, they may have diverse opinions, but they were united in one thing: please develop your own source revenue so that going forward, we will not be continually be dependent on the equitable share to survive running the counties. Number two, members of the Senate have expressed a very strong view that resources within the county, once we have released them from here, will be utilized properly as intended. So that, Mr. Speaker, we will not have money released by the Senate through these bills, and then they go down there and then services are not given to the people. Mr. Speaker, thirdly, members may have had diverse opinions, but they agreed that time has come that money that is allocated from the budget should follow function. And Mr. Speaker, the counties have been given a heavy load of functions, and the national government is not releasing the requisite funds so that our counties may develop. Mr. Speaker, with all this divergent opinion, this House, Mr. Speaker, is a house of reason, is a senior house, is a house that is full of people with a lot of experience in their own professional fields, even in political leadership, in administration. Mr. Speaker, I truly believe that by the time that we will come to bring this matter to a vote, we will have reached a consensus. Maybe those who expressed opinion differently from the report will be persuaded. And we hope that as many of us will come to support. And for me, the reason is that we have had a drop in the expected collections. And I remember very well, Mr. Speaker, which I mentioned, but it is good for me to underscore this point, that, Mr. Speaker, even during the negotiations, during the mediation process, after the cameras were removed, we were given facts and figures by the Treasury, so that the question now moved from there is the wishful and the reality. There is the reality, what can we disburse and what is available. So, Mr. Speaker, and I think the debate here also captured that idea that we need also to be, alive to what the realities, fiscal realities that we live in the country today. So, Mr. Speaker, with those very many remarks, again, I want to say thank you very much. And I still want to say thank you to the leadership that we enjoyed, and Senator Ali Roba. Our team was led by him, and the team from Parliament National Assembly was led by Honorable Dindi Nyoro. So, Mr. Speaker, I still want to urge members to consider supporting this report. The issues they have raised, we can still keep talking. Fortunately, we are not going to vote today. So as I move, I prepare, as I reply, Mr. Speaker, I pray between now and the time we will vote, we shall persuade each other to support this report. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, with those many remarks, I beg to reply, and I request pursuant to Standing Order number 66, sub 3, that the putting of the question be deferred to a later date. Mr. Speaker, I submit. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Mungatana. Pursuant to the provisions of Standing Order 66, the putting of the question as regards the report is deferred to the next sitting of the House. Clerk, please call the next order.
Order number 9, motion, consideration of the National Assembly amendments to the Cotton Industry Development Bill, Senate Bills number 5 of 2023.
Honorable Senators, I call upon the Chairperson, Standing Committee on Agriculture, Livestock and Fisheries, Senator Murango, to move the motion.
Asante sana Mstahiki Spika. Mstahiki Spika, ningetaka kuomba kwamba mswada kuhusu ustawishaji wa pamba, marekebisho ambayo ilitoka katika bunge la taifa, mswada nambari 5 wa mwaka 2023. Yes.
Could you please read out in under as reflected in the order that the National Assembly amendments?
Thank you.
Before you contribute in the language of your comfort.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the National Assembly amendments to the Cotton Development Bill, Senate number 5 of 2023, be now considered. Mr. Speaker, if you allow, because I'm a member.
Proceed in Kiswahili, Senator Murango.
Asante Mstahiki Spika. Mstahiki Spika, mswada wa pamba ambao uko mbele yetu ulimaliziwa katika bunge la seneti na ukaenda katika bunge la kitaifa ili uweze kuzingatiwa baada ya kufanya misururu ya mikutano na uhamasishaji wa umma katika sehemu tofauti na kamati ya kilimo katika bunge ya seneti kuleta ripoti katika seneti. Mstahiki Spika, ilipoenda kule kuna marekebisho ambayo bunge la kitaifa imeomba iweze kufanywa na ikarudishwa tena katika kamati ya ukulima, uvuvi na uchumi wa uvuvi samawati katika bunge la seneti, na tukakaa chini tukafalia njuga swala hilo, tukaangalia mambo yote ambayo inafaa kuangaliwa, na Mstahiki Spika, tukakubaliana ya kwamba marekebisho yote ambayo yalitoka katika bunge la kitaifa inafaa kuzingatiwa. Kwa hivyo hakuna senator yote ambaye alikuja kupinga marekebisho ambayo ilitoka katika bunge la kitaifa. Na kwa hivyo Mstahiki Spika, ni kusema ya kwamba ripoti ambayo tulienda na tukaiandika na kuileta katika bunge la seneti ipo, na hivyo nimesema ndo inasema kwamba tunakubaliana na marekebisho yote ambayo pia iko katika ratiba ya seneti ambayo tuko nayo siku ya leo. Mstahiki Spika, huu mswada ni mswada muhimu sana kwa sababu ukizingatia kwamba maeneo ya kiuchumi ambayo inaitwa EPZ, ambayo viwanda mingi ambazo zinatengeneza nguo ambayo inatokana na pamba, leo hii ni kusema viwanda vile sasa wananunua vitambara za nguo kutoka nje, sana nchi ya Bangladesh. Mstahiki Spika, tulienda katika gatuzi la Busia na tukawa na mkutano, na nichukue nafasi hii kumshukuru sana Senator wa Busia Omtata kwa sababu alitupatia nafasi nzuri ya kukaa na kuongea na wanabusia, na serikali imejenga kiwanda mpya ya kuweza kushughulikia pamba na kuitoa nguo. Shida ambayo ilikuweko ni kwamba hakuja kuwa na sheria muhimu ambayo inaratibu venye biashara ya ukuzaji wa pamba na uuzwaji wa pamba unafaa kufanywa, na tukafikiria kwamba ni vizuri mswada ambao uliletwa mbele yetu na Senator Beth Siengo tuweze kuzingatia na kufanya kuwa ni msingi katika ile biashara ya kilimo, ili iwe ni kilimo biashara, sio bora kilimo. Mstahiki Spika, maeneo yote nchi hii ukizunguka
kuanzia Nyanza kwenda magharibi mwa nchi, ukuje upande wa bonde la Ufa, ukuje maeneo ya kati, uende Ukambani na uende mpaka Lamu katika eneo la pwani, ni kwamba hiyo maeneo yote pamba, kwa sababu inastahimili ukame, inaweza kuzwa katika sehemu nyingi. Ni kitenga uchumi kizuri kama tutawekesha na kuhakikisha kwamba kuna mtaji wa kukuza pamba, pembejeo zinapatikana, na mstahiki Speaker, kama mbegu ambazo zinaitwa za BT, ambayo kilo moja ni zaidi ya shilingi 7,000, lakini ni pamba nzuri sana ikipewa wakulima. Na kwa hivyo tukaonelea kwamba kama wakulima watapewa nafasi na wapewe pembejeo, wataweza kunufaika pakubwa na pamba. Mstahiki Speaker, pamba ni mmea ambao una maana sana, kwa sababu ukitoa ile pamba ambayo kwa kimombo inaitwa lint, inaenda kutengeneza nguo. Ukitoa mbegu ya ndani na kuifinya, inatokanga mafuta, na ingine ndio wanaita kwa kimombo biodiesel, na hata mafuta ya kutumia katika kupikia. Na ile ambayo inambaki ndio ina keki kutoka kwa pamba, cotton seed cake. Inakuanga ni nzuri sana, ama ni kiungo muhimu katika kutengeneza vyakula ambavyo vinalisha wanyama, kwa wale wengi ambao ni wakulima ng'ombe wa maziwa, mbuzi wa maziwa, nguruwe na hata kuku. Mstahiki Speaker, hiyo ni kusema pamba ni mmea ambao kila kitu ambao inatolewa kwa pamba inatumika vilivyo, na inaweza kuwa ni kitenga uchumi kikubwa kama tunaweza shughulikia pamba na kuhakikisha kwamba viwanda vinatosha. Lakini jambo ambalo lilikuwa kubwa tulipokuwa tukizunguka ni kwamba viwanda vingi vya pamba, kimombo ginneries, mingi zimevunjika, zingine ziliuzwa, zingine mashamba, wakilitimba walikuja wakavamia mashamba na wakayachukua kwa njia ya ulaghai. Kwa mfano mzuri ni kiwanda cha pamba ambako kilikuwa mahali kunaitwa Ngurubani katika gatuzi la Kirinyaga. Utakuja kupata kwamba machini hazipo, ziliimbiwa, kiwanja hiko, ishaenda. Lakini tuna mpango kama kamati ya kwamba mswada huu utakapopita, kwa sababu sasa nadhani hii ndio safari ya mwisho ili uweze kupita, kwamba tutazunguka tukiangalia hizi viwanda, na pia tutahusisha pia katika wizara ya mashamba kuhakikisha kwamba ile mashamba ilikuwa ya kiserikali ambapo pamba ilikuwa inaenda pale kushughulikiwa na kusaidia mkulima, kwamba hizo viwanja vimerudishwa. Tuhakikishe kwamba kama ni machini zimerudishwa, wakulima katika Kenya nzima waweze kufaidika. Mstahiki Speaker, ukiangalia sana sana katika maongezi, ama unapotoka hapa na uende sehemu kame, ukitoka uende Kitui, ukitoka uende Makueni, ukitoka uende Busia, ukitoka uende maeneo kama ya Homa Bay mahali Senator Kajwang' ametoka, swali ambao unaulizwa na wale wananchi ni kwamba tunasikia watu wakitanja majani chai, tunasikia wakitanja kahawa, tunasikia wengine wakitanja miwa, tunasikia wengine wakitanja majani chai, lakini chetu ni kipi katika hizi gatuzi? Kwa sababu pia sisi ni walipa kondi ambao tunafaa kushikiliwa, ambao tunafaa kupewa mitaji, ambao tunafaa kusamehewa mikopo, ili pia sisi kama walipa kondi tusikie sisi ni wa Kenya. Kwa hivyo pamba ambao tunaongelea siku ya leo ni moja wapo ya mmea ambao unaweza stawisha na kusawasisha Wakenya wengi katika Kenya hii, ili kila Mkenya asikie kwamba ni Mkenya na haja tengwa kando. Mstahiki Speaker, Lamu inakuza pamba, ukienda Kilifi utapata wanakuza pamba, na kwa hivyo kamati ambayo mimi ni mwenyekiti, kwa kundura zake Mwenyezi Mungu, tunahakikisha ya kwamba ile mswada ambao inakuja yote kila sehemu katika nchi hii itakuwa na kitenga uchumi. Kama ni wale watu ambao wanavua, samani Mstahiki Speaker, nadhani kuna kasoro kidogo hapa.
Senator Murang'a, the chair previously ruled that whenever you are in the house, you've got to keep your cell phones on silent mode.
Samani,
take note of that.
Samani Mstahiki Speaker, nitahakikisha hiyo nimefuatilia. Mstahiki Speaker, nilikuwa namalizia kwa kusema ya kwamba mmea wa pamba ni mojawapo mmea ambao unasawasisha jamii nyingi katika Kenya hii, ambao inafanya Wakenya wasikie kama Wakenya ikifufuliwa,
ili kusiwe wakati kuna watu ambao wanasamehewa mikopo, kuna watu wanapewa mitaji, iwe kwamba kila Mkenya hako na mmea ambao unampatia pesa ya kuweza kujikimu. Mstahiki Spika, nilikuwa nimesema kwamba ukiangalia takwimu ya mahali ambao pamba inapandwa, pamba ni mmea mmoja unaweza kustahimili ukame sana. Ni kwamba Kenya nzima hii sehemu nyingi sana inaweza kuzwa pamba. Mstahiki Spika, pia katika hii kamati tumekuja na miswanda ama na sheria zingine za kutunga pia kwa jamii ambazo ni wafugaji, kuhakikisha pia wao wakati inafika wakati wa kunufaika pia wananufaika na kilimo biashara ambayo pia wanafanya. Mstahiki Spika, nitamalizia niseme ya kwamba mswada huu utakapotiwa sahihi na Rais wa Jamhuri ya Kenya, utakuwa ni mswada wa 3 ambao umepitia katika kamati ya ukulima katika bunge ya Seneti, ambao tumehusika vilivyo kuhakikisha kwamba imepita. Ingawa lazima niseme kwa sababu kuna mswada ambao tayari umepita, mswada wa miwa, mwenye alikuwa pia ni mdhamini mwenza katika huo mswada alikuwa Senator Wafula Wakoli ambao ni wa kamati ya ukulima. Kuna mswada wa kahawa ambao sasa huku unasomwa kwa mara ya 3 katika bunge ya Seneti ambao pia ni umepita. Kuna mswada ambao umeletwa na Senator Beth Siengo ambao ni wa kamati ya ukulima ambao ndio tunakuja kuamalizia, na niseme kwamba kwa jumla tuko na miswada 15 ambayo imeletwa katika ambao imepitia katika hii kamati ya ukulima. Lakini nitakuwa pia nikalili wa akili kama sitasema ya kwamba kuna mswada moja, Mstahiki Spika, ambao ulituuma sana kama kamati. Mswada ambao ulikuwa unahusu ndengu ambao ulikuwa umeletwa na Senator Enoch Kiwambua. Ndengu ni kama pamba, inakuzwa kila mahali. Nalipochukua nafasi kuongea pia na wanabunge wa bunge la kitaifa kujua kwa nini mswada ulikuja ukafifia na ukafa kwa njia ambayo haikueleweka, ni kwamba wengi waliokuwa wanaongea walikuwa wanaongea kwa ile hali ya kutojua. Unasikia mtu anasema kuna mswada wa ndengu, kuna mtu atalipishwa shilingi milioni 1. Lakini adhari ya kufanya siasa na miswanda ambayo inapita katika bunge la kitaifa na bunge la Seneti ni moja. Mstahiki Spika, ni kwamba tulipokaa kwa sababu ya mswanda hamiwa hakukuwa na siasa nduni. Huo mswanda rais ashatia kidole. Mswanda wa kahawa haujakuwa na siasa. Hivi karibuni utatiwa kidole kwa sababu nasoma kwa mara ya 3. Mswanda ambao tuko nao, mswanda wa papa, haujatiwa siasa. Tayari kwa sababu tunakubaliana na bunge ni kusema unaenda kutiwa kidole. Wale wakulima wa ndengu wamepoteza nafasi muhimu sana. Sana sana wakati huu ambao serikali inapambana kuhakikisha kwamba kuna lishe bora na chakula na usalama wa chakula nchini upo. Mstahiki Spika. Mstahiki Spika, pia ningesema ni changamoto tulio nayo kama Seneti kwamba tunafaa tuna miswanda inayokuja hapa. Tuwe pia na wale wanaohusika kuhakikisha kwamba wananchi wanajua tunapofanya na kueleza waziwazi wanaelezewa. Kwa sababu kuna watu wanatumia miswanda inayokuja katika bunge la kitaifa. Katika sakafu unaona kuna watu wanatumia hiyo nafasi kupigana kisiasa kwa sababu wanafikiria huyu mbunge akipitisha hii atapata umaarufu, atakuja kuchaguliwa nani wala nani. Watu wanasahau ya kwamba wanaopitisha na kuzingatia kwamba miswanda imepita, wengi hata lile jambo wanalofuatilia si wakulima, lakini sisi wote ni Wakenya. Kwa mfano, Mstahiki Spika, mimi nimetoka eneo la Kirinyaga ambako sisi hatukuzi miwa. Lakini ilipokuja mbele yangu na ukiangalia wakulima miwa wamekuwa katika lindi la umaskini kwa miaka ambayo hatuwezi hesabu. Tulipoona nyuso katika chemilu cha wazee ambao wamelima miwa na bado ni maskini, tuliposikia kilio sa wakulima ambao wamelima miwa lakini watoto wao wasomi, wale afya zao zimedhoofika na bado ni wakulima na wameendelea kulima, kukiwa na utu na ukiwa kiongozi lazima ulivalie njuga jambo lile kuhakikisha kwamba wale watu wamepata haki yao. Wakati rais alisema kwamba mswada wa sukari uko hapa uzingatiwe, tulichoma mafuta usiku kucha na mchana kutwa. Mimi kama mwenyekiti mwenza wa mbunge kutoka Emmanuel Wangwe, tukakaa chini tukahakikisha kwamba tumemaliza mswada. Saa hii tunapoongea kuna matumaini katika wakulima wa miwa, kuna matumaini katika wakulima wa kahawa, kuna matumaini katika wakulima majani chai, kwa sababu najua pia Mr. Speaker, kama Senator Bomet, wewe pia umeleta mswada kujaribu kulainisha mambo ya ukulima wa chai. Lakini tumaini ya wakulima wa ndengu iko wapi? Tumaini ya wakulima wa pamba iko wapi? Kutakuwa na tumaini kama tutakuja na kuhakikisha kwamba miswada kama hii inapita bila kuletewa siasa ambazo hazina maana. Mstahiki Speaker. Mstahiki Speaker, nikimalizia, Waswahili husema wavuvi wa pweza hukutana mwambani. Ningesema sisi kama wavuvi wa pweza maseneta tukutane hapa, ndio mwamba wetu, tukuje tuunge mkono mswada huu na marekebisho yote, ili wakulima wa pamba wapate nafasi na waweze kuendelea na ukulima wao na waweze kufaidika. Asante sana Mstahiki Speaker.
You need to call on someone to second.
Samani na kwa hayo nitamwita Senator wa Kitui, Senator Wambua, kuunga mkono huu mswada.
Senator Wambua, as you second the bill, you also proceed to make your contribution, because I've noticed you've made a request.
I thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I take this opportunity to second the bill and the report on the cotton industry development bill. Mr. Speaker, I must begin by thanking the promoter of the bill, Senator Beth Siengo, and the committee of the Senate on Agriculture for making bold steps, the Speaker, to process the bill to this point. And I also want to thank our partner committee in the National Assembly for proposing certain amendments that, as you have heard our chair say, Mr. Speaker, I sit in the Agriculture Committee of the Senate, and the committee has gone through the provisions of the amendments as proposed by the National Assembly, and we have agreed with them. Mr. Speaker, cotton in this country, at some point, not now, used to be a major source of foreign exchange. A lot of Kenyan farmers earned a lot of money from this crop. Besides the money that they earned as foreign exchange, the Speaker, this country also benefited from the cotton industry, because apart from the farmers that were growing the crop, then we used to have a lot of ginneries that were processing the cotton into yarn, and then we also used to have a lot of vibrant, Mr. Speaker, textile companies, Rivertex, Ikomi. When we were growing up, Mr. Speaker, because that time we used to have cotton fields in Kitui, and the story of second-hand clothes, popularly known as Mutumba, was not a very popular story when we were growing up in the 70s, late 70s, Mr. Speaker, and early 80s, because then cotton growing was still very vibrant, and people would easily buy newly manufactured clothes in the country, because the raw material for that then would be cotton. Mr. Speaker, the failure by successive governments to properly regulate the industry led to the collapse of commercial cotton farming as we used to know it. I do know and appreciate, the Speaker, that there are still regions that are supported to grow cotton, and they are sustaining quite a number of ginneries and garment processing factories. The Speaker, not very long ago, we had a commitment from the outgoing ambassador of the United States of America in Kenya, Meg Whitman, that the United States government would continue to promote the revival of cotton farming in this country, so that this nation and farmers from Kenya and business people from Kenya can also continue to benefit from the provisions of AGOA, that is the African Growth Opportunities Act. Mr. Speaker, the sorry state of affairs as we stand today is that we have cotton or garment companies in this country that are forced to import cotton and cotton products from as far as China and other African countries to process and manufacture clothes. And yet, we have areas in this country that are very, very conducive for cotton growing. The Speaker, it is my prayer and my wish that this bill will pass and be ascended into law by the President, so that then the benefits of cotton farming in the regions that cotton is grown, farmers may now begin to realize those benefits. Speaker, as the Senator of Kitui, I want to confirm to this House that cotton farming is a very lucrative and rewarding farming activity in Kitui and the region if it can be properly supported. We still have some ginneries that have stalled that don't operate. Of course, most of them use outdated technology, so they are not even functional. But the climate, the climatic conditions from Kitui and the region, and Mr. Speaker, for the information of the House, Kitui, Machakos, and Makueni are no longer Lower Eastern region, they are Mount Kenya South region. So that region, Mr. Speaker, is very, very suitable for cotton farming. There is a matter that the Senator for Kirinyaga, my chairman in the Agriculture Committee, has touched on. And I want him to hear this, but Senator Manzo would not allow him to hear. I would want him to hear this. That, Mr. Speaker, we are here to represent our counties. We are here to represent the wishes and aspirations of people from our counties who are Kenyans and who have a right for representation and proper support from the government of the day, irrespective of their relationship with that government. As Speaker, I want to thank my chairman, Senator Morango, because so far, as he said, this is the third bill that we have successfully processed. And we expect that very soon it will be ascended into law by the President, and the benefits contained therein then will trickle down to the farmers. But as Speaker, we as a committee are also a worried lot. And I also want to bring this to the attention of the Speaker. so that the Speaker can also give proper direction on this matter. Now, Speaker, I sponsored the dengue bill, and all the senators in the House during the time for debate on that bill supported the bill and voted for the bill. They proposed amendments, and the committee considered all the proposals for amendments here, and the Secretariat helped the committee to process what we believed was a very good bill to help dengue farmers across the country. The Speaker, when the matter went to the National Assembly, first of all, it delayed there. It was there for the longest time. And when it finally came up, we heard strange things, Mr. Speaker, that the intention of the bill was to make sure that farmers obtain licenses to grow dengue. Speaker, I want to stand on the floor of this House today as I support the cotton bill to say that if there is any bill, any dengue bill that proposes that proposes the licensing of farmers to grow the crop, then that is not the bill that we processed in the committee. That's not the bill that the Senate passed. That must be another bill from another place, because that provision is not there in that bill, Mr. Speaker. And on the basis of that bill, the bill was shot down at the National Assembly. But what is even more worrying, Mr. Speaker, is that naturally, if a bill is rejected in one house after having been passed in the other house, the natural consequence of that is to take that bill through mediation. That's the natural consequence. But here's a situation there where, Mr. Speaker, once that bill was rejected at the National Assembly, then I have not heard of any communication about any mediation on that bill, and the matter has just died there. Mr. Speaker, the dengue farmers in this country deserve better. They are Kenyans. They want to be supported just as the tea farmers want to be supported, just as the coffee farmers want to be supported, just as sugar farmers want to be supported, just as any other farmer, even livestock farmers, want and deserve to be supported. Then dengue farmers in this country deserve to be supported. And let's remove partisan petty politics from legislation, because that will not help anyone, Mr. Speaker. I expect, Mr. Speaker, that at the convenience of this House, perhaps when we resume, then, Mr. Speaker, a mediation will be constituted, a mediation team will be constituted to look into the dengue bill and see if there is any clause there that talks about licensing of farmers, and that will be the first clause we are going to be removing from that bill. But I can assure you, Mr. Speaker, there is no such clause in that bill. Mr. Speaker, with those many remarks and in cognition of the fact that, Mr. Speaker, we need to also transact some other business in the House, I support the amendments, I think. I second, Mr. Speaker, I second.
Thank you, Senator Wambua. Now, Honorable Senators, I propose the question that the National Assembly amendments to the Cotton Industry Development Bill, Senate Bills number 5 of 2023, be now considered. I can see we have got members who are willing to contribute to this, and I'll start with Senator Mongatana Danson.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to make my contribution on this matter. Mr. Speaker, when we were growing up in Tana River, there was the Hola Cotton Ginnery. And Mr. Speaker, the Hola Cotton Ginnery was a great source of employment to many people, Mr. Speaker. People would wake up in the morning, head to the ginnery. There would be others who would be coming out from night duty. Mr. Speaker, there was a lot of flow of money within Hola. Hola town is the headquarters of Tana River County, Mr. Speaker. Many people also would visit Tana River County, the buyers. There would be a lot of activity, Mr. Speaker. Lorries would come to ferry people to work. Lorries would come to collect the product. Mr. Speaker, money would flow in a very predictable way. The town was a town that was bustling with economic vibrancy. Mr. Speaker, people would come from far-off towns in Kenya to come and settle, to come and try and do business within Hola town. Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, the Hola Cotton Ginnery died, and it died a very sad death. Mr. Speaker, when I heard the chairman of Agriculture Committee moving, I called him aside and asked him, you have been mentioning various counties where cotton was being produced and cotton growing and production needs to be revived. Why not mention Tana River? And he has promised, Mr. Speaker, that he will come in that direction. Mr. Speaker, why am I mentioning this? In some of our counties, Mr. Speaker, like Tana River County, the businesses that are going to actually spur economic growth as they used to in many years ago when we were growing up, they were agri-based businesses, Mr. Speaker. Those businesses that were doing some form of manufacturing from the products that came from farming, they were the ones that were giving greater source of employment to the people of Tana River County. Mr. Speaker, when the ginnery closed down, and we were told somebody has purchased the infrastructure, we expected that there will be injection of capital, there will be a fresh start, maybe new machineries will be brought. But Mr. Speaker, that was just a dream. Nothing has happened since that time. Mr. Speaker, we have been following. And personally, Mr. Speaker, when elected as senator, we have been following this matter. We have been promised again by the national government that they will revive that cotton ginnery. That in fact, that there is such a demand for cotton that it will be necessary as a matter of demand-supply economics, that they will support the growth of the industry within Tana River County. But Mr. Speaker, that promise has not come to happen. Mr. Speaker, I want to join those who have said many times that we wish well for those who are doing coffee farming, they get government support. Tea farming, they get government support. And so on, they get government support. But for those of us who have been doing cotton farming, using irrigation in Hola, we have not gotten any government support since the closure. There's been no attempt at all, Mr. Speaker, to revive that industry, despite promises being given by government. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, we are happy that today we are passing a law that says that they will be deliberate in supporting the growth of cotton industry within Kenya. And Mr. Speaker, I pray that since cotton grows in areas that have rain deficiency, such as Tana River and other areas that have been mentioned before, Mr. Speaker, We pray that the government will put money. This law, we are going to pass it. As we debate here, I know many people will support it, and I'm asking all other colleagues who are not seated but listening to this debate from outside, that this is one crop that if we give it proper support, proper infrastructure support, like we are giving to coffee, to pyrethrum, to sugar, to tea, Mr. Speaker, a lot of farmers from areas that were previously thought to be marginalized, they will start making good money, and they will start living the life, the dream that Kenya promises. So, Mr. Speaker, I stand here to really support this bill in the mediated version. I support the amendments that have been brought. And, Mr. Speaker, this is a promise to the people of Tana River and other areas in this country that have capacity and potential to grow this crop, that, Mr. Speaker, it is going to help our people. And there is hope that, in fact, this industry is going to start growing again. So, Speaker, when we heard that Rivertex has been reopened, Rivertex has started working again, and that they have cotton deficiency, Mr. Speaker, the joy and celebration of the promise that there will be a revival of the industry back home in Tana River County by the national government was great. But, Mr. Speaker, Rivertex has been operating, and they have been importing their cotton. And, Mr. Speaker, always importation tends to kill local industry. Importation tends to drain our reserves. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to sit down by making a final plea that as we support this new law, Mr. Speaker, we want to urge, even in the proposed supplementary estimates by the national government, that some money be put towards supporting the farmers in this area. Because if we support our farmers there, this is where the rubber meets the stone. This is where our people will start benefiting from good and wise leadership. Other crops like sugarcane have now seen the light, and there's real true hope, because they had been forgotten. There was a bad structure and how it was being managed in this country. Then we passed that law, and now farmers can look forward to a brighter future. Now we are on cotton. We are praying that the farmers in this country, farmers in Tana River County, they will now look forward to better earnings. Mr. Speaker, with those many remarks, I beg to support this law. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Mungatana. Now, honorable members, to facilitate the conclusion of this particular motion, I exercise the provisions of Standing Order 34-2A to extend the sitting for another 10 minutes. I will allow Senator Kajwang 5 minutes to contribute, then the mover to reply, then we defer the putting of the question to a later date. Senator Kajwang, kindly proceed to take your
Thank you.
5 minutes. We look at how far you'll go. We can extend as long as we are within the 15 minutes that we are allowed by the standing orders to extend the sitting of the
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for your generosity. I come from a cotton growing zone. I'm a member of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and the history of the Seventh-day Adventist Church is synonymous with the history of cotton growing in my region. A pioneer Adventist pastor called Pastor Kaskalen, when he introduced the Adventist Church, he also introduced modern schools. He introduced modern medicine. It does not mean we didn't have medicine, but he brought in the modern pharmaceuticals. But he also introduced cotton as a cash crop. Over the years, the Rachuonyo region, the area around Kindu Bay. Kindu Bay was a town that was founded on the wealth and the riches of cotton. Today, Kindu Bay is a shell. It's a pale shadow of itself because the cotton industry collapsed in the 1980s as a result of the structural adjustment programs. As we drive around Nyanza and Western, and even Ukambani, there are centers that are called store pamba. Store pamba meaning that that is where the warehouse, the aggregation center for cotton was located. And those store pambas, they are all over the main highways from Homa Bay to Kisumu. It tells you how valuable that industry was back in the days. Mr. Speaker, the production of cotton is not where it should be. It has averaged at about 25,000 metric tons over the years, but now it's about 7,000 versus a potential of 200,000 tons. And Mr. Speaker, there are many factors. There was a liberalization, the structural adjustment programs. There was also the issue of mitumba, which then led to inflows of second-hand clothes that competed with locally produced fabric and textile. But also there's the issue of the quality of seed. Mr. Speaker, there's been debate on whether BT cotton should be allowed, and the jury is still out there whether we are making the right decision. But the right decision must be adoption of seed and technology that is pest resistant. The generations, and even growing up, cotton growing was a very labor-intensive activity. And Mr. Speaker, there are certain factors of production which may have changed and which may have shifted our comparative advantage as a country. Land is not as big as it was back then. Families are not as big as they were back then. Polygamy thrived because when you are a polygamous man with a huge cotton farm, you had an entire army that would go out to the field to work on the cotton farms and to harvest the farm. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, you notice that one of the things that fueled slavery in the United States and in other countries was cotton production because it was extremely labor-intensive. We need to innovate. We need to ensure that this board that has been proposed in this particular bill is a board that drives innovation, drives the adoption of technology. Because after the repeal of the statutes that abolished slavery in the United States, they still continued growing cotton, but they decided to turn to technology to replace the slaves and forced labor. And so, Mr. Speaker, I support this establishment of the Cotton Board. We, however, need to be very clear and tell the country what our strategy and thought process is with regards to agriculture. This country has evolved our strategies and thoughts around agriculture. When Mwai Kibaki took over, Professor Peter Nyang' Nyong'o and his team came up with the agriculture sector development strategy. And no, it was the SRA, I think it was a strategy for revitalization of agriculture. And it is that strategy for revitalization of agriculture that led to the consolidation of the various agricultural boards into one super agency called the Agriculture, Food and Fisheries Authority. Over the years, we've been in a process of unbundling that AFA, because now we've got a fisheries authority, we have a tea authority, we've got a dairy board, we are now having a livestock authority in the cards, and now we are talking of a cotton authority and a sugar board. So we need to be very clear, very deliberate when it comes to policy and when it comes to industrial strategy, because industrial strategy is the thought process that takes advantage of a nation's comparative advantage so as to elevate it in the global market. Our comparative advantage lies around agriculture because of favorable weather. Our comparative advantage lies around logistics because of location, and those are the things that we must exploit. Right now, with the election of Donald Trump as the President of the United States of America, we are not sure of the future of the AGOA arrangement. And we know that Athi River and the EPZs, most of them thrive on that AGOA arrangement. So, Mr. Speaker, I know this is outside this bill, but those of us in the Agriculture Committee, we now need to bring the executive so that they pronounce themselves on the country's direction and strategic thinking when it comes to that sector. Because from the days of Anyang' Nyong'o, when we had the strategy for revitalizing agriculture, there have been changes. Along the way, in 2010, we decided to devolve agriculture. That was a very, very significant policy direction for the agriculture sector. The agriculture policy was published in the year 2016. I am not sure, my chairman, whether that policy has been adopted by the cabinet. Because if a nation whose economy is agriculture, is based on agriculture, which provides the highest number of employment opportunities, does not have a sessional paper or a policy statement that has been adopted by the cabinet, it means that we are flying on autopilot. These are things that we will push the government and the executive to put in place. Mr. Speaker, within my remaining 1 or 2 minutes, let's ensure that even as we provide the role of county governments in this, legislation, that county governments then do not become a hindrance. Let them be facilitators. Sometimes county governments can be a problem by introducing additional tariffs, by introducing additional cess, by introducing additional registration requirements. I have seen somewhere in the report that even where the county government has the responsibility of registering cotton farmers, there will be no cost to it. But let's also think about the distribution of seed and input to those farmers. It should never be a centralized approach. Mr. Speaker, perhaps we need to take the approach that the Kenya Tea Development Authority has taken, where distribution of fertilizer to tea farmers is not done by a central bureaucracy, but is done through the tea factories. And that should apply here, so that we don't have situations of those Linturi fertilizers finding their way in cotton farms, and therefore compromising the output of our cotton farmers. Mr. Speaker, I support this. There are a lot of things I would have said about this, but ultimately, as a country, we need to find those things that we are good at, invest in the things that we are good at. Cotton would be one of those things. Coffee is already one of those things. Tea is one of those things. Let's take advantage of the things that we are good at and project ourselves as a leader in those areas. If the independence fathers were able to make cotton a valuable product, if entire economies, like in Western and Ukambani and even parts of Tana River, parents could take their children to school on the basis of cotton earnings 30, 40 years ago. What about today, when you have better technology, when you've got better varieties, better breeds, when you've got a bigger population that can provide a market for our cotton? Mr. Speaker, this should not be seen as another process of import substitution. But in our minds, we must prepare ourselves that we'll still need to compete with the best when it comes to the cotton and textiles and apparel sector. People like Vietnam, people like Lesotho, people like even Botswana. They are countries that have made this a comparative advantage, and we must be ready to compete with them. Let us not cheat our farmers that we will shield them from the vagaries of globalization. They must fight. They must find their space within the global markets, because producing cotton is one thing, connecting the farmer to markets is another. We must encourage them to grow cotton in Kindu, in Kitui, in Busia, but connect them to global markets the way the AGOA opportunity has presented itself to us. But ask ourselves that if AGOA was to collapse, what are we going to do with Athi River? Can we find alternative markets? And Mr. Speaker, I believe we can find alternative markets, but we must fix our labor practices. Countries that have succeeded in the apparel sector also have tried to regulate the cost of labor. I think Kenya, we are very litigious, and we'll always be talking of a certain minimum wage, but we are also putting in a lot of payroll taxes that then makes the Kenyan worker more expensive. And so some of these big corporations are happier to go to Bangladesh, to Pakistan, and those other economies. Mr. Speaker, I support and I look forward to the enactment of this law, and I look forward to the day when the cotton farmers of Homa Bay and Nyanza are going to start having bank accounts and are going to have money in those accounts. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kajwang. I now call upon Senator from Kirinyaga, Senator Murango, to respond. To reply, sorry.
Asante sana mstahiki Speaker, kwa dakika 3 peke yake nishukuru wale maseneta ambao wameunga mabadiliko ambayo yameleta katika mswada wa pamba. Nataka kuwashukuru kwa sababu ya hayo. Ya pili niseme ya kwamba pamba ni kitu muhimu sana kwa sababu inakuwa malighafi ya chakula ya wanyama, mafuta. Na ningeomba Senator Kanjong ambao ni mmoja ambao tuko katika kamati ya ukulima, tulitembea Kitui tukapata ya kwamba mafuta yanayotolewa katika mbegu za pamba ndio inatumika katika kutoa nguvu za umeme kwa majenereta zao, na bado inatumia kama mafuta kwa gari zao. Na najua Senator Kajwang pia ndio mwenyekiti wetu katika kamati ambayo inahusika na mabadiliko ya tabia nchi. Kwa hivyo hilo ni jambo nzuri sana pia tukiweza kupata. Kwa hivyo pamba si nguo peke yake. Hili ni malighafi ya vitu zingine nyingi. Mheshimiwa Speaker, kwa mujibu wa kanuni za kudumu za Seneti 26.3, Ninaomba kwamba swali la mswada huu liahirishwe hadi siku nyingine. Asante sana Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Murango, for your reply. And pursuant to the provisions of Standing Order 66, putting of the question is deferred to the next sitting of the House. And members may now rise. Honorable Senators, it is now 41 minutes past 6, and having concluded the business for which I extended the hours of sitting pursuant to Standing Order 34-2A, the Senate stands adjourned until tomorrow, Thursday, 28th of November, 2024 at 2:30 p.m.
that are subjected to international provisions must adhere to the local procurement laws. I think that in the overview tends to domesticate most of those procurements or institutions that want to have their tenders favor them because they are from the foreign jurisdictions. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, clause 4, where it talks about, and I know there are a couple of them that talks about the monitoring and evaluation of technology and knowledge skill transfers, tends to say that where any tenders that have been done that includes the transfer of knowledge, there must be an annual report. I think this is good because it is going to provide a situation where, a mechanism where we can be able to know what are some of the benefits that we are able to get through the procurement process that were made, because there is a list, there is something that shows that these are the benefits that came to the country from a procurement process, a service that was ordered from abroad. We didn't have the local knowledge, now we do. I think that is a very good one. Clause 5, Mr. Speaker, really captured my attention as well, where there's an expansion of the Public Procurement Authority, where there was an inclusion of the Law Society of Kenya. Of course, I noticed that there's ISPAC representation and Kenya Institute of Supplies. Mr. Speaker, this continues to widen and bring in various knowledge, various persons from every quarter of our nation, so that the entire place is widened up. Mr. Speaker, clause 6, which seeks to amend section 33, is what has really captured my attention, Mr. Speaker, where when there is a procurement in a particular county, that then we give the manufacturers from that particular county, or the products that are manufactured locally, are given precedence. I think that is absolutely incredible. If there is anything that we can celebrate, it's actually this bill, because now everybody who is, in fact, one of the sections I'll be able to capture a bit also mentioned that we give preference to even the businessmen that are in a particular county to be able to participate in bidding and be given preferences in being given the jobs. Of course, section 44 captures what I mentioned before, the aspect of technology, knowledge, and skills transfer from the foreign farms. But then we continue to prioritize the locally produced products. I think this bill has really asserted that as much. The most radical one now, Mr. Speaker, is clause 11. Clause 11 amending section 53 on the penalty that is awarded for persons who registers a firm on behalf of a foreign firm for purposes of benefiting from a procurement that falls within the prescribed threshold. Of course, it talks about that we raise the threshold from 500 million to 1 billion for the local contractors. I feel, though, in my view, that and of course, this is to the sponsor of this bill, you need to tighten it even more. Doing 5 million for me is low. Make it so tough. We could even do 10 million so that this becomes a deterrent. Everybody must be able to follow this law because this is going to empower us as a nation. And of course, I was very, it's very touchy that anything above 1B, 30% of the extra services, we must be able to demonstrate what is it that you are getting for the locals. Mr. Speaker, Section 15, which seeks then to amend, Clause 15, which seeks to amend Clause 86. Then, you are not supposed to contract a foreign company unless the knowledge, skill, and good service is not available in the country. These are so radical because it will then force anybody who wins a tender to source locally if you are not able to get those people or the skill or those who have the knowledge for that specific, what has been procured. Mr. Speaker, I will want to pick on, still on the same way, I know it talks of clause, section 135, that is clause 17, still goes to buttress the issue of the inclusion on the part of the tender documents on the transfer of skills and technology plan. I think it still to buttress that this is going to be cemented to the future, that everybody who is procuring the services, you must be able to look at it from the locally available skills. And therefore, being put in the documents, I think, is so critical. Mr. Speaker, Clause 139 Clause 20 of the bill, which seeks to put a new, to put safeguards for those whose payments are overdue. I think this brings in the aspect of repaying bills. I think we need to be able to support and we reduce people who have been able to supply goods and their services. They suffer, maybe they have taken loans, maybe they have been able to subcontract other entities, and they are not able to then pay. So this creates a ripple effect within the economy. And I think creating this safeguard, bringing this conversation into this act, then continues to buttress what we've been talking about on the issue of the pending bills in our country. Mr. Speaker, Section 155 continues to tighten the very aspect of, providing a report to prove of an availability of local skilled and unskilled labor. That is where you've been given a procurement, you've been given to supply something, and it is not available. Mr. Speaker, the accounting officer is demanded that he should provide a report. I don't know what else we can be able to celebrate than this very firm clause, which makes me to really support it. And, and as I make my contribution, Section 157, Mr. Speaker, is one that also captured my attention, where foreign contractors, in order to increase the amounts for citizen contractors, to prohibit subcontracting of local procurement contractors to foreign contractors. But then, when you've won a tender, you do not need to subcontract a foreign contractor. I think also it captures also that for the mandatory procurement of 40% of goods and services, I think just an overview of the same. So basically, Mr. Speaker, I think this bill, so that I give also an opportunity to others to contribute, this is timely. We support it. It is going to be radical. It is going to empower Kenyans. I want to encourage Kenyans to be manufacturers, to be providers of locally produced goods and services. The opportunity has been handed over to you. This is a progressive government, and I want to really, again, one more time, appreciate one of our mentors. For sure, he's been our mentor to most of us who are young parliamentarians, Kimani Kuria. You've been a great person to us. All the time we come to where you are so that you can share with us a few tips here and there to be great persons in this parliament. Thank you very much. I support.
Honorable Kitur, that mentorship has been great. I've never listened to you enlighten the House the way you've done today. Congratulations. The Honorable Robert Mbui.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity. I also rise to support this Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Amendment Act. Mr. Speaker, you know, public procurement and asset disposal bills are very, very important. In fact, this is really what is meant to cure corruption, because if the procurement of goods and services is done in the right manner, then we can be able to get rid of all these issues of corruption. Prices of government services or jobs would come down if we can be able to sort out how to identify the right people to do the business, and then, of course, to confirm the right and the proper winning bidders. Now, Mr. Speaker, the proposal to ensure local contractors are supported is extremely important. And the proposal that at a certain threshold of $1 billion, the international investors will not be allowed to bid. I think that's a very, very good idea, because it basically gives an opportunity for local contractors to be able to get projects. But, Mr. Speaker, we also have to be very, very careful, because we know that even that in itself is also an avenue where we might end up creating some other level of corruption. Because in the registration of businesses, people can strike deals so that a person has a local company, and you know Kenya is well known for a lot of cowboy contractors, a company that is registered in the names of local Kenyans, but then the investment is coming from outside. I don't know how we are going to cure that. And I think I want to agree with one of my colleagues who talked about the punishment that should be spelled out in this bill. That punishment has to be severe, so that we are sure we cannot have a situation where someone is lending out their name because they cannot raise the money, but investors can. You have seen international investors that are being indicted in the US for corruption, and we were just about to get into the position of giving them major projects in this country, in energy, in transport, in health. So we have to be very, very careful how we tackle these situations. So let's make sure that we don't have any corruption within that system. Transparency and accountability in procurement must also be fast-tracked by Treasury. How is it possible that the same company can win tenders across, and some of these things are not coincidence. It's very obvious that somebody somewhere must have been, there must have been some kind of corruption. And some of the companies that are getting jobs all over are also, in fact, some of the charges against them are to do with bribery. And bribery is the biggest form of corruption. So we have to be very, very careful.